The holographic message flickered out before Captain Alina Voss, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. The words from the Rojan Collective echoed in her mind, each one more chilling than the last. Earth is a contender in the trials. Succeed, and you will secure your place among the stars. Fail, and you will be erased from existence. Alina's eyes swept across the room, where the rest of the team stood, equally stunned by the transmission. Dr. Lucas Fyron, the team's lead scientist, had his arms crossed over his chest, brow furrowed. He was always the rational one, the skeptic, but even he seemed unsure now. Beside him, Sergeant Kasia Romov, a battle-tested veteran with a reputation for no-nonsense efficiency, was staring at the floor, fists clenched. What the hell does erased from existence even mean? Kasia muttered, her voice tight with disbelief. It sounds like a damn threat. It's not just a threat, Kat, Alina replied, her voice steady despite the unease gnawing at her insides. It's a warning. Whoever these Rojan Collective are, they want us to prove something. Her gaze lingered on the swirling wormhole projected by the ship's systems, a direct link to the trials awaiting them. It had been activated by the message, an ominous sign of things to come. There's no turning back now, Dr. Fyron said, his voice tinged with resignation. We've been chosen. That's all we know for sure. It's either play or die. The rest of the team exchanged uneasy glances. They were the best humanity had to offer, a mix of military veterans, scientists, engineers, and strategists. But no amount of preparation or training had prepared them for something like this. If the Rojan Collective was as powerful and ancient as the message implied, Earth was about to face a test unlike any other. Alina swallowed the lump in her throat, gathering her composure. We're not backing down. We represent humanity. Every single person on Earth is counting on us. We'll face this head-on. The ship's AI chimed in, breaking the tension. Coordinates for the first trial are set. You will arrive in T-minus 30 minutes. Alina nodded, her mind racing. This wasn't just about survival. It was about proving that Earth had a place in the vast, uncaring galaxy. There had been whispers of a galactic hierarchy, one where powerful civilizations looked down on the less developed species. Earth had been a backwater, isolated, and often overlooked. But this was their moment to show they were more than just survivors. We have no idea what to expect, she said, turning back to the team. The message didn't say anything about what the first trial entails. But we can't go in blind. We need to make sure we're as prepared as we can be. Dr. Fyron, do you have any ideas about the Rojan Collective? Anything that can help us? Fyron hesitated, clearly uncertain. Not much. The Rojan are ancient, perhaps even older than the first known galactic civilizations. Their motivations are unclear. But we're not dealing with a species that operates on any conventional logic. We'll need to adapt fast. Adapt fast? Kasia laughed dryly, shaking her head. Sounds like a plan. Let's just hope fast is enough. Alina shot her a look, steely and determined. We're more than just a plan. We're humanity's hope, and we'll prove our worth, no matter what they throw at us. The ship lurched as it entered the wormhole, the stars outside warping into streaks of light. The team fell silent, each member deep in their own thoughts, preparing for the unknown. Alina didn't know if they would succeed or fail, but one thing was certain. Humanity's fight for survival had just begun. The first trial was approaching, and they would face it together, ready or not. And as the dark void ahead swallowed them whole, Alina could only pray they weren't too late. The ship's hull groaned under the pressure as they emerged from the wormhole. The air outside was thick, heavy with the smell of sulfur and scorched earth. Through the observation windows, the team could see nothing but a vast, rocky expanse stretching out beneath a blood-red sky, jagged mountains looming in the distance like the spires of a forgotten city. We've arrived, Alina said, her voice sharp, though her heart raced in anticipation. Prepare yourselves. The ship touched down on the surface of the alien planet with a soft thud, the engines winding down to a low hum. The team filed out, stepping onto the rocky terrain. The ground beneath them trembled faintly, as if the planet itself was alive and aware of their presence. Dr. Fyron adjusted his glasses, scanning the horizon. This is a volatile world. The seismic activity is high, and the atmosphere's a cocktail of toxic gases. We need to stay alert. Thanks for the warning, Doc, Keisha muttered, checking her gear. It's not like we're not already nervous. Aleva nodded, gesturing toward the distant mountains. Stay close. We don't know what's out there. Keep an eye on your surroundings. As they advanced, the silence of the world weighed on them, broken only by the occasional rumble beneath their feet. No birds, no wind, just the oppressive stillness of a place forgotten by time. The only movement came from the shifting rocks and the distant plumes of volcanic ash that rose like ghostly fingers into the air. Then the ground trembled violently. The team paused, eyes wide, as the earth beneath them cracked, sending a cascade of rocks tumbling down the mountainside. Without warning, something massive emerged from the fissures in the earth, an enormous reptilian creature with scales as black as night, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly hunger. The creature roared, sending a shockwave through the air. Its tail whipped around, smashing boulders into the ground, and it lunged toward them with terrifying speed. The team scattered, weapons drawn. Alina, what the hell is that thing? Katia yelled, sprinting toward cover behind a large rock formation. I don't know, Alina replied, drawing her plasma pistol and taking aim, but it's not friendly. The creature, easily 20 feet long, was like nothing they had ever encountered, its skin hardened like stone, armored and nearly impervious to small arms fire. Alina's shots ricocheted off its hide, and the creature let out a deafening roar in response, causing the ground to shake even more violently. Move now, Alina shouted. We need to get to higher ground. The team scattered, running toward the rocky outcrops that lined the valley. As they moved, they could feel the heat rising from below them. Volcanic fissures were opening all around, spewing plumes of smoke and ash into the air. The creature, relentless, pursued them with shocking speed, its jaws snapping at the air. Get to the ridge. We can outmaneuver it, Alina ordered, her mind working through options as she darted forward. Katia fired a burst from her energy rifle, hitting the creature's exposed underbelly, but it hardly seemed to flinch. The creature's tail swung again, narrowly missing Sergeant Romov as she dove behind a rock. The sheer force of its movement sent debris flying in all directions. We need a plan now, Fyron called out, sounding more anxious than usual. This thing's too tough, we can't fight it head-on. Alina glanced at the shifting environment. There was no time for a prolonged battle, they had to move, and quickly. But then, something caught her eye. A series of narrow, jagged caves carved into the mountainside. It was their only chance. Alina, what are you thinking? Katia shouted, dodging another swipe from the beast's tail. Run for those caves, Alina ordered, already starting to sprint toward the rocky entrance. We used the terrain to our advantage. The team followed, with the creature hot on their heels, its massive body shaking the ground as it charged. Alina's heart pounded in her chest as they reached the caves, scrambling for shelter. The entrance was narrow, forcing them to squeeze through single file, with the creature's massive jaws snapping just inches behind them. When they finally made it inside, panting and covered in dust, they looked back to see the beast stop at the mouth of the cave, its enormous head twisting side to side, unable to fit through the entrance. It let out an enraged roar, but it could not follow them. Alina leaned against the cave wall, her pulse still racing. That was too close. Dr. Fyron, his face pale from the adrenaline rush, wiped his brow. We've got to keep moving. Whatever that creature was, it's not the only danger here. This planet is alive with threats. And we're on its dinner menu, Katia said grimly. Alina surveyed her team, the weight of their situation sinking in. The first trial had only just begun, and it was already clear they were in for a fight unlike any they had imagined. But she wouldn't let that stop them. Earth would survive, no matter the cost. "Stay sharp," Elena said, her voice low and determined. "This is just the beginning." The cave was silent, save for the distant growls of the beast outside, still pacing, its frustration palpable. The team huddled in the dim light, catching their breath and processing the ordeal they had just survived. The rocky walls around them seemed to close in, adding to the feeling of claustrophobia. But as the growls faded into the distance, Elena allowed herself to relax, if only for a moment. "We need to move now," Elena said, breaking the stillness. "The trial is far from over. The Rojan Collective is watching, and we're not getting any closer to answering why we were chosen." Dr. Firen looked at her, his brow furrowed. "You think they sent that creature after us deliberately to test our strength?" "I don't know, Doc," Elena replied, "but I have a feeling we're not dealing with random dangers. Every part of this planet is designed to put us to the test. The beast was only the first challenge. Now we need to stay focused." "Let's just hope the next one's a little less monstrous," Keisha muttered, still catching her breath. "I don't think my nerves can handle another one of those things." They gathered their gear and continued deeper into the cave system, the narrow passageways forcing them to move single file. The temperature dropped as they descended, and the air became heavier, charged with an unnatural energy. The deeper they went, the more alien the environment became. Strange, bioluminescent fungi clung to the walls, casting an eerie glow that illuminated their path. "What is this place?" Kajia asked, her voice reverberating off the stone walls. "I don't know," Elena said, her voice low, "but it feels wrong, like it's not meant for anyone to be here." As they rounded a corner, they found themselves in a large chamber. At the center, a massive, intricate puzzle was laid out on the floor, lines of glowing symbols and strange geometric shapes. A soft hum filled the air, vibrating through the stone and into their bones. "This is it," Dr. Firen said, voice tinged with awe. "The trial of minds. This is a test of intellect, of logic. We need to solve this to move forward." The puzzle seemed impossible at first glance. The shapes twisted and shifted, their meanings unclear. The symbols, alien and unfathomable, flickered like a language just out of reach. Elena stepped closer, examining the puzzle, her mind racing. "This is no ordinary puzzle," she said, kneeling beside it. "We're going to need more than just brute force to get through this. Whoever made this wanted to make sure we earned our way forward." Dr. Firen crouched beside her, studying the symbols intently. "I've seen something like this before, back in the archives. It's an encryption system, ancient. If we input the wrong sequence..." "We're trapped," Katia finished, her voice flat. Elena nodded. "Exactly. So we need to figure out the right pattern. Fast." Hours passed as the team worked in silence, each trying to make sense of the puzzle's cryptic design. The tension in the room grew thicker with every failed attempt. They had no choice but to rely on each other's expertise. Dr. Firen led the effort, applying his vast knowledge of alien technologies, while Keisha focused on the logic behind the sequence, her sharp instincts guiding them toward the right answers. Elena kept an eye on the clock, knowing that time was a luxury they couldn't afford. Then, as the hours wore on, something shifted. A realization. Dr. Firen's hand hovered over a particular symbol. It was an odd, almost imperceptible detail, a tiny flicker of light that hadn't been there before. His fingers brushed the symbol, and suddenly, the entire puzzle illuminated, the shapes aligning perfectly. The hum grew louder, and the puzzle slid open like a door. "Nice work, Doc," Katia said, a grin tugging at her lips. Elena exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. That was too close. The chamber around them shifted as the floor opened, revealing a narrow stairway descending even deeper into the bowels of the planet. The walls around them pulsed with light, guiding their path. We've passed the first part, Elena said, her voice firm but tinged with the exhaustion of the long trial. But don't get comfortable. Whatever comes next will be just as hard, if not harder. The team hesitated for a moment, exchanging wary looks, but Elena's voice was enough to push them forward. This was what they had trained for, what they had signed up for, to prove humanity's worth, and as they descended into the unknown, they knew that the real challenges were just beginning. But Earth would stand firm. They would face whatever the Rojan Collective threw at them, together. With resolve in their hearts, they continued down the stairs, ready for whatever lay ahead. The stairway led them deeper into the heart of the planet, and as they descended, the oppressive atmosphere seemed to grow heavier, more foreboding. The walls of the tunnel, now slick and polished like obsidian, reflected their dim light back at them, giving the illusion of endless darkness. Every step echoed, reverberating through the hollow cavern below, as if the planet itself was watching, waiting for them to falter. Elena's pulse quickened. The deeper they went, the more the air felt charged with a strange, invisible force. There was something ancient about this place, something beyond their understanding. It was as though they were trespassing in a realm that had long been forgotten. At last, they reached the bottom, stepping onto a platform that overlooked a vast, chasm-like abyss. A dark, swirling vortex of energy hovered at the center, its edges crackling with an unsettling energy. The air here was thick with the smell of ozone, and the shadows that clung to the edges of the chasm seemed to shift, as if alive. "This is unreal," Keiichi whispered, her voice barely audible as she gazed out at the swirling abyss. "What the hell is this place?" "I think we're about to find out," Elena said, her eyes narrowing as she surveyed the surroundings. There was something primal about the energy in the air, something that tugged at the edges of her consciousness. She could feel the shadows pressing in, threatening to engulf them. Dr. Fyron stepped forward, adjusting his glasses. "This isn't just a place, it's a test. The Rojan Collective is forcing us to confront our fears, our deepest, darkest fears. This is the trial of shadows." "Great," Keisha muttered. "I don't need to relive my worst nightmares to prove Earth's worth." Elena could feel the unease creeping into her chest, but she pushed it down. Fear had no place in this trial. They had come this far, they couldn't turn back now. "We need to face it," Elena said, her voice firm. "Whatever this is, we have to confront it head-on. Stay focused." The moment she spoke, the shadows around them began to shift. Dark tendrils reached out from the edges of the chasm, snaking toward the team with unnatural speed. The temperature dropped, and the air grew colder. Suddenly, Elena felt a sharp tug on her mind, a whisper at the edge of her thoughts. She turned, but there was nothing there. "Elena," Keisha said urgently, her voice trembling. "Look." Elena turned to see what Keisha was pointing at. Out of the darkness, shapes began to form, shadows coalescing into figures, slowly taking shape. The first to appear was a faceless silhouette, a tall figure in dark armor, its features indistinct but undeniably familiar. Elena's stomach twisted as she recognized the form. It was her, or rather, a distorted, nightmarish version of herself. The figure moved toward her, and she felt a cold shiver run down her spine. "No," she whispered, "this isn't real." But the figure reached out, and Elena felt a weight settle on her chest, as though she were being suffocated by the very shadows themselves. Her breath caught in her throat as a voice echoed in her mind. "You are weak, you will fail, humanity will fall." The voice was her own, a twisted reflection of every self-doubt she had ever harbored. Her worst fear, the fear of failing her people, of letting Earth down, had materialized before her. The shadowy version of herself raised its hand, and Elena felt her body freeze, unable to move or resist. "Elena," Keisha's voice broke through the fog in her mind. "Fight it, it's not real." Elena's heart raced. The figure's grip tightened, and for a moment, she was consumed by fear. But then she remembered. She remembered the people she was fighting for, Earth's future, the lives of every human who depended on them. She wasn't alone. She couldn't be. With a surge of willpower, Alina broke free, shaking off the shadow's grip. The darkness around her recoiled, as if it had been repelled by her resolve. The shadowy figure staggered back, flickering like a dying flame. "Stay together," Alina shouted. "We need to face our fears, all of us. This is the trial of shadows. It's not real, but it's testing our minds. Our fears, we're stronger than this." The shadows writhed around them, forming more figures, each of them mirroring the deepest, darkest fears of the team. Dr. Fyron's shadow was a twisted version of himself, consumed by failure and regret. Keisha's was a reflection of her lost comrades, their faces twisted in agony, a reminder of the lives she had been unable to save. Each of them faced their own version of terror, but Alina's voice cut through the darkness. "Do not let it control you," she yelled, her voice steady despite the fear tightening in her chest. "We are human. We face our demons, together." One by one, the team began to break free. Dr. Fyron, shaking with the effort, managed to force his fear into submission. Keisha, her expression grim but determined, reached out and sliced through the shadows with a savage fury. Together, they overcame the darkness, each of them pushing through their own personal fears. The vortex of shadows began to dissipate, fading like a bad dream. The figures melted away, and the chamber grew still once again. The air felt lighter, and Alina allowed herself a breath, though her heart still pounded. The trial of shadows had been the most personal challenge they had faced yet, but they had survived, and they had proven that even in the darkest moments, humanity would never surrender. "We've passed the trial," Alina said, her voice calm but firm. "Let's move forward. We're one step closer." The team nodded, each of them carrying the weight of their inner struggles, but stronger for having faced them. As they made their way out of the chamber, the path ahead seemed clearer, the darkness a little less daunting. But Alina knew one thing for sure. Whatever came next, they would face it together, and nothing could break them. The air grew thick with tension as the team left the chamber of shadows behind. The oppressive weight of fear had lifted, but it had left them with a lingering sense of unease. The darkness still clung to the edges of their minds, and the silence was almost too heavy, as if the planet itself was biding its time, waiting for the next challenge to unfold. Alina led the way, her senses sharp as they ventured deeper into the labyrinthine corridors of the ancient structure. The walls around them began to change once again. The smooth, obsidian-like stone had given way to more intricate carvings, depicting scenes of civilizations long gone. Some were humanoid, others far more alien, their faces twisted in expressions of terror or awe. "I don't like this," Keisha muttered, glancing at the strange engravings. "This place doesn't feel stable. It's like it's shifting, changing every time we turn a corner." Alina nodded. "That's because it is. This planet isn't just alive, it's aware of us. It's reacting to our presence." "We've been through enough," Dr. Fyron said, adjusting his glasses. "But if the Rojan Collective has anything to do with this, we're going to need more than just guts to survive the next trial. This feels like it's going to be different." Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble again. The hum that had accompanied the trial of shadows returned, vibrating through the air. The walls shifted, and before Alina could respond, the entire corridor ahead of them warped. The once stable passage now rippled like water disturbed by a stone. "Alina," Keisha shouted, her voice tinged with panic. It's changing again." Before Alina could answer, the world around them seemed to collapse. The tunnel distorted, folding in on itself. The floor, the walls, the ceiling, all melted into a swirling vortex of color and light. Alina barely had time to react as the floor dropped out from beneath them, sending the team plummeting into an endless void. For a brief, terrifying moment, everything was disorienting. The sensation of falling, the endless cascade of light and shadow, left Alina dizzy. Her mind tried to grasp onto something solid, but it was impossible. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. They landed hard on solid ground, the jarring impact leaving them breathless and disoriented. Alina pushed herself up, blinking as her surroundings came into focus. She was no longer in the tunnels of the alien structure. The landscape before her was impossible. They stood in a desolate wasteland, but not like any they had seen before. The sky above them was a swirling mix of dark clouds and blinding flashes of light. The ground was cracked and barren, devoid of life, yet familiar in its emptiness. "What is this place?" Katia asked, her voice shaky as she surveyed their new surroundings. Alina felt a strange chill run through her. This wasn't just another part of the planet. It was a memory, or more accurately, a distortion of time itself. "This is the trial of time," Dr. Fyron said, his voice thick with disbelief. "This place is a reflection of past events, of decisions made, choices that could have been different." Alina's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, past events?" Before Dr. Fyron could respond, the ground beneath their feet cracked open, and from the fissures emerged figures, humanoid shapes, their faces obscured by the glow of the fractured sky. These weren't just any figures. They were versions of themselves, but twisted, warped by choices they had made in other timelines. Decisions they could have, or should have, made differently. One of the figures stepped forward, a dark silhouette of Alina, her expression cold and distant. This version of herself was dressed in armor, its edges jagged and crude, stained with the marks of battle. The figure spoke, its voice unnervingly familiar. "You could have stopped this. You could have saved them all, but you failed. You failed them." Alina's breath caught in her throat as her own words, her own guilt, echoed around her. "What do you mean? What are you?" "You allowed Earth to fall," the twisted version of herself said, the words dripping with accusation. "You let it crumble to dust under the weight of your hesitation, your weakness." Keisha's voice trembled behind Alina. "This is wrong. This isn't real." But it was real in a way. These were the consequences of every choice they had made, the possible futures that might have come to pass if they had chosen differently. It was the weight of regret, the echoes of decisions long past, presented in the form of these distorted versions. "You have no one to blame but yourself," the figure continued, its voice growing darker. "You let Earth bleed. You let it die." Alina's pulse raced. The guilt, the fear of failure, it had all been buried deep inside her. But now, with this vision of a future shaped by her own choices, it threatened to consume her. "You're wrong," Alina said, her voice trembling but defiant. "I'll never let that happen. Not while I'm still standing." But as she spoke, the landscape around them began to change. The sky darkened, and the figures of the other team members, versions of themselves they couldn't recognize, emerged from the shadows, each one representing a different version of failure. The trial of time was testing them in ways they hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just about surviving this planet. It was about confronting every decision they had made, every action that could lead to a future they couldn't control. The challenge was clear. They had to confront these distorted versions of their past and prove they had the strength to make the right decisions, not just for themselves, but for Earth. Alina steadied her breath, facing the twisted versions of herself and her team. She wouldn't falter. They would fight through this together. "We are Earth's future," she said firmly, "and we will not fail." The distorted versions of themselves loomed around the team, their expressions twisted by regret, fear, and anger. Each team member faced a reflection of their worst decisions, their deepest insecurities made flesh. The ground trembled once again as the trial of time pushed them further, forcing them to confront the futures they could have shaped, the mistakes they had made, and the doubts that had once crept into their minds. Alina's heart pounded as she stood face to face with her own twisted reflection. The figure in front of her was more than just a distorted version of herself. It was a vision of everything she feared she could become, A leader who failed, a commander who let her people down, a woman consumed by her own guilt. You think you can save Earth? The dark Alina sneered. You're weak. You've already failed once. Why should this time be any different? The words cut deeper than Alina cared to admit. She could feel the weight of them pressing against her chest, threatening to crush her resolve. But she wouldn't give in. She had come too far, and the people of Earth were depending on her. The trial was designed to break them, to exploit every vulnerability, but Alina wouldn't let that happen. I am not you, she said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her chest. I've made mistakes, but I won't let them define me. I'll keep moving forward. I won't stop until Earth is safe. Her words hung in the air for a moment, and the distorted figure of herself wavered. It seemed to shrink back, momentarily losing its power. Alina stood tall, meeting her own reflection's cold, accusatory gaze. Behind her, she could hear the others confronting their own twisted selves. Keisha's version was dressed in tattered combat gear, her face scared and bloodied, an image of the soldier she might have become had she given in to despair after losing her team in the early days of the mission. You couldn't save them, Katia, the twisted version of her said, its voice raw with anger. You were weak. You gave up when they needed you most. Katia clenched her fists, her breathing shallow. No, she muttered through gritted teeth. I didn't give up. I kept fighting. For them, for Earth. With a powerful cry, she charged at the shadow of herself, slashing through the air with her weapon, dispelling the illusion. As the distorted version faded into nothingness, Keisha stood, breathing heavily but resolute. Dr. Fyron was next, standing in front of a vision of himself buried beneath mountains of scientific data and research, a version of himself that had allowed the pursuit of knowledge to overtake his sense of morality. You sacrificed everything for answers, Fyron, the figure taunted. You sacrificed them, your team, your family, for the sake of progress. What makes you think you won't do it again? Dr. Fyron's face tightened, a flicker of guilt passing across his features. But then he shook his head, his resolve hardening. I never sacrificed them. I always tried to save them, to protect them, and I won't make the same mistake again. He raised his hand, and with a sharp gesture, the distorted vision of himself shattered like glass. The pieces vanished into the air, leaving only the silence of their shared victory. Alina turned to see Keisha and Dr. Fyron standing tall, their faces lined with exhaustion but unwavering in their determination. Together, they had faced the darkest parts of themselves and emerged stronger. But the trial wasn't over. The ground beneath them trembled again, and they could feel the air grow colder. The trial of time was relentless. A voice echoed through the barren landscape, its tone distant and echoing, as though it were coming from every direction at once. You think you have overcome your fears? The voice sneered. You think you've conquered your weaknesses? You are not yet worthy. Before they could react, the world around them began to warp again. The swirling, fractured sky above darkened further, and the ground began to crack open, sending deep fissures through the desolate land. The vortex they had fallen through before began to reappear, growing larger and more menacing. The voice boomed again, this time with more authority. You are not done. You have one final test, the trial of resolve. Suddenly, from the cracks in the ground, a series of figures began to emerge, figures they had seen before. This time, they were not distorted versions of themselves, but rather the people they cared about, the people they had sworn to protect. They were their loved ones, their friends, and their families, each of them standing in front of them, frozen in time. Alina's breath caught as she saw her younger brother, Rian, standing among the others. He was the last person she had expected to see in this trial, and yet, there he was, looking at her with an expression of disappointment. You couldn't save me, Ryan's voice echoed, a tremor of sorrow lacing his words. You said you would. You said you'd protect me, but you failed. Alina's heart broke at the sight of him. She remembered the promise she had made when she left Earth, the weight of that promise still weighing on her shoulders. She had failed him in a way she couldn't undo, And now, in the heart of the trial, it was being thrown back in her face. "No," she whispered, her voice shaking with emotion. "I didn't fail you. I did everything I could. I'll keep fighting. I will never stop fighting." The others were facing their own versions of lost loved ones, each one carrying the burden of their past. But the test was the same for all of them. Could they stand firm in the face of their greatest regrets and keep moving forward? Elena took a deep breath and locked eyes with Ryan's figure, determination rising within her. "I will save this world," she said, her voice steady. "I'll save Earth, and I'll honor every life we've lost. I will never give up." With those words, the trial's twisted illusions began to fade. The ground stopped shaking, and the sky began to clear. The team stood resolute, ready to face whatever challenge came next. The trial of time had shown them their weaknesses, but it had also made them stronger. As the last echoes of their fears disappeared, Elena turned to her team. "We're not done yet. We've proved ourselves worthy. Now let's finish this." The trial had pushed them to their limits, but together, they had shown that Earth would never give up. The ground, now solid beneath their feet, felt strangely serene after the chaos of the previous trial. The swirling sky above had cleared, revealing a deep, unbroken expanse of stars. Yet beneath that peaceful exterior, Elena could sense that something far darker still loomed. The trial of time had tested their resolve, had forced them to face their deepest fears and regrets, but they were not yet finished. The final challenge awaited them. The voice that had haunted them during the trial now echoed in the silence, a low, omnipresent hum that seemed to come from all directions. "You have proven your resolve," the voice said, its tone cold and clinical. "But now you will face the trial of unity. Alone you are insignificant, but together you may achieve greatness, if you can learn to trust each other." Elena's brow furrowed. She exchanged glances with Keisha and Dr. Fyron. Each of them had come so far, individually and as a team, but this trial was unlike any they had faced before. The voice was right. Every step had been an individual battle. But this one, this final test, would demand that they rely on each other in ways they had not yet imagined. The air around them grew still as a new challenge manifested before them. Suddenly, the ground split open, revealing a vast chasm that stretched into the unknown. From the depths of the abyss, a massive structure began to rise. It was a colossal geometric tower, twisting upwards like a spire reaching for the heavens. The surface shimmered with an otherworldly energy, radiating a pulsating, dangerous glow. "The path ahead is treacherous," the voice warned. "Only through unity can you ascend. Fail to work together, and you will be lost. Forever." Elena's mind raced. She had fought against alien invaders, navigated deadly trials, and faced impossible odds. But this, the very essence of unity, was something altogether different. It wasn't just about surviving the challenge. It was about trusting her team, relying on them with a level of faith she had not yet fully embraced. "We've come this far," Elena said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty she felt. "We've proven our strength individually. Now we prove it together." Keisha nodded, her usual fiery determination shining through. "No one's getting left behind. We're all in this together." Dr. Fyron adjusted his glasses and smiled slightly. "I'm starting to believe that might be the only way we're getting out of here." With no more words left unsaid, they moved forward as one. The path leading up to the tower was narrow and treacherous, each step bringing them closer to the pulsing core at the top. But as they ascended, the structure itself seemed to react to their presence. The air around them grew thick with energy, the pulse of the tower matching the rhythm of their hearts. Every few steps, a new obstacle presented itself. Walls of energy shot up from the ground, creating barriers that blocked their path. But unlike the trials before, the obstacles could not be conquered with force alone. The first barrier that appeared was an intricate, glowing pattern that seemed to shift with every move they made. Elena, recognizing that brute strength would not work, stepped forward, gesturing for the others to follow. "Wait," she said, her voice calm but commanding. "This isn't a trial we can win by fighting. We need to synchronize." Katia, who had always preferred action to contemplation, hesitated but trusted Alina's instinct. "All right," she said, taking a deep breath. "We'll follow your lead." Together, they stood before the shifting wall of energy. Alina reached out, letting her hand hover just inches from the barrier. As she did, the pattern shifted again, this time forming a circular shape. She instinctively nodded, and the others followed her lead, positioning themselves to form a circle around the pattern. "Focus," Alina instructed. "We need to align our thoughts, our actions. Let's move together." For a moment, nothing happened, but then a soft hum reverberated through the air. Slowly, the energy in the pattern seemed to respond to the collective will of the team. They were no longer individuals. They were a unit, each member contributing their strength, their focus, their resolve. The barrier shimmered, its glowing edges vibrating with energy, before it began to fade away, dissipating like smoke in the wind. "We did it," Katia breathed, her voice full of awe. But there was no time for celebration. As the barrier melted away, the tower itself seemed to respond. The ground beneath them trembled, and a series of platforms emerged, floating in midair, stretching toward the next level. "This is it," Dr. Firen said, his voice filled with wonder and caution. "The final test is upon us. We must be more than just a team, we must act as one." Alina nodded, determination in her eyes. This was no longer about overcoming their individual fears or regrets. This was about forging a connection stronger than any trial they had faced. Each challenge before them had taught them something, about themselves, about each other. But this trial demanded the ultimate lesson: true strength comes from unity. As the platforms moved, the team stepped forward, each person focusing on the others, aware of every movement, every heartbeat. They were no longer just fighting for themselves. They were fighting for each other. And with that realization, the tower pulsed brighter, its energy now aligned with their collective will. Together, they were unstoppable. Together, they would face whatever the trial had in store for them. As they reached the top of the tower, the final challenge emerged, a massive door, forged of energy and light, blocking their path. But the door didn't open with force or speed, it opened with trust. Alina extended her hand, and as she did, the others did the same, their fingers brushing together in a perfect union. The door slid open. The final trial was over. They had succeeded, and they had done it together. The door before them opened slowly, the hum of energy reverberating in the air, filling the space with an ethereal resonance. As it parted, the team stood together, their hands still lightly touching, a silent confirmation of their unity. The weight of the trial of unity was behind them, and yet the air felt heavier, as if the very atmosphere was holding its breath. Beyond the door lay a vast chamber, glowing with a soft golden light. The floor was smooth and reflective, creating an illusion of endless depth. At the far end of the chamber stood a figure, a being made of light and energy, standing tall and imposing, its form radiating a sense of power and ancient wisdom. "You have completed the trials," the figure's voice echoed, deep and resonant, though its tone was neither cold nor judgmental. It was neutral, a reflection of something far greater. "You have proven your resolve, your unity, and your worth. But what awaits you now is not simply a reward, it is a new beginning." Alina took a step forward, her team following her lead. They had faced the darkness within themselves, traversed through nightmares and fears, and come through stronger. But what lay ahead? What new path would this trial reveal? "What happens now?" Alina asked, her voice steady despite the uncertainty that remained. The figure regarded her with an almost unspoken understanding. "You have transcended the need for validation. The trials were never about proving your worth to me or to anyone else. They were about proving it to yourselves. Earth is on the cusp of a new era, and you are the harbingers of that change." Dr. Firen's eyes widened as he looked at the figure. Are you saying, we're ready? Ready to face the galaxy's challenges? The figure nodded. You are no longer just humans. You are the guardians of the future. Your victory in the trials has unlocked the path to something greater. You will carry the legacy of Earth across the stars, forging alliances, exploring new worlds, and ensuring the survival of your species. But with this power comes a responsibility, one that requires unity, trust, and wisdom. The weight of the being's words sank into the hearts of the team. They had been tested, torn apart by their own insecurities and fears, but they had proven that they were stronger together. Now they stood on the precipice of something far greater than any of them could have imagined. You will be called upon to make decisions that will affect not just Earth, but the entire galaxy, the figure continued. And when that time comes, remember what you have learned here. The trials will not be your last challenge, but they will guide you in the right direction. A moment of silence passed, and Elena felt a sense of peace wash over her, a calm certainty that this was only the beginning. The trials had been harrowing, but they had forged a bond among them that could never be broken. They had faced their demons and emerged victorious, not because they were perfect, but because they had learned to trust each other, to rely on each other's strengths and cover each other's weaknesses. We won't fail, Elena said, her voice unwavering. Not Earth, not each other. We're ready. The figure's form shimmered, a faint smile appearing across its luminous face. I believe you are. The chamber began to shift, the golden light intensifying as it spiraled outward, folding into itself until it became a swirling vortex. The team braced themselves, but there was no fear this time, no uncertainty. The light enveloped them, and in an instant, the chamber was gone. They found themselves standing on the surface of a new world. The sky above was filled with colors that defied description, and before them lay a vast, untamed landscape, a planet ripe for exploration. The air was crisp and alive with possibilities. The figure's voice echoed one final time, but this time it was no longer distant. It was within them, a whisper of encouragement, guiding them forward. You have completed your trials, it said. Now you are the architects of Earth's future. Go and make it a future worth fighting for. With those words, the team stood at the threshold of a new era, ready to face whatever the galaxy had in store for them. Their journey was far from over, but they had learned the most important lesson of all. The strength of humanity lay not in the power of the individual, but in the unity of its people. Together, they would rise, ready to shape the galaxy in Earth's image, a galaxy where hope, courage, and trust would lead the way. And so the trials ended, but their true mission had just begun.